Now we are about to speak to the one and only CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, Mr. Kariuki Ngari, to help us understand and put into perspective matters credit access, especially to the market. To be specific, majority of the businesses in the country lie under MSMEs. So credit, how's it been? Thank you very much, Mr. Ngari, for speaking to us.
Thank you.
Before you issue credit to somebody, you have to determine their credit worthiness. How do banks determine this?
I think one of the things that we have to take into account is when banks lend money, they are lending depositors money, and they expect that money to be repaid. So the first thing is to look at the business that is borrowing. Can it pay the money? So cash flow becomes a very important determinant of the credit worthiness of a business. Let's look at the business entity, and because cash flow tells you whether you can be able to pay. And then you also look at the capital structure. How much is the owners or the entrepreneurs behind the business invested in it? Because you cannot, that also determines how much debt you can take. If they put a very small share capital, then obviously the lending will just be as small as well, because they also have to have a stake. That is very, very important. And then you also look at the records, compliance with regulations. If you take, for instance, in Kenya, we take a very high standard in terms of tax compliance. That's very, very important. So you also look at to see whether the entity or the business is actually complying in making sure that they are paying the due taxes. Because if you're not paying the due taxes, then that business can be in danger. And then finally, you also look at the credit bureau. The credit bureau today is very active. It's been very active in this market. So you also look there, because that tells you the credit worthiness. Has this business borrowed, has it borrowed previously, and how well are they paying their debts? So a positive reference there, it enhances your credit worthiness. If it is negative, then it brings down your credit worthiness. So all these factors are very, very important.
Definitely, and you're talking about the credit bureaus. When you speak generally to Kenyans about credit bureaus, it comes to when somebody defaults, and it holds a negative connotation to a great extent. This notion, first of all, what needs to be done to change the notion of understanding a credit bureau as a tool of reference to your credit worthiness, not just a tool of reference when you're defaulting?
I think it's out there. People know that it's a tool of reference for both, but obviously people pick the negative aspect. It's very, very important that when you borrow, you must repay. So if you've got a history of not repaying, then it becomes irresponsible on the part of lenders to advance you more money. Because at the end of the day, you do not want to burden a business, you don't want to burden an individual, you do not want to burden a family. So you become very sensitive to, if you are unable to pay a facility for whatever reason, then what you should be doing, the first thing you should do is negotiate with the lender, so you can agree on the terms for the repayment. But if you've chosen not to pay, then obviously it will reflect in your credit score, and you'll have a negative, you'll be negatively portrayed in the bureau. And so if you want to borrow again, you don't want serial borrowers. You don't want to encourage serial borrowers, because then you bring everybody down. You bring the depositor's money is put at risk, the banking institution is put at risk. So you do not want serial defaulters. So it's a very, very important tool. And if you look at the international, in some of the developed markets where the bureau is extensively used, not only by banks, but also other lenders, then it opens up the credit space. Whether it's electricity utility, for instance, retailers will give you a card and you can pay installment because you've got a good reference in the bureau. So it extends the credit space. And we know that in the modern economy, without credit, the economy cannot move. So it's very, very important to have a positive bureau that is used not only by the banks, but everybody who is in the business of whether it's retailing or lending.
And speaking of modern economy, there is the issue of fintechs and mobile lending platforms, where we've seen majority of businesses are very small in the country. Now, they kind of lack structures. Somebody needs to borrow 2,000 bob. He buys something, so a bale of clothes, so that he sells and gets 3,000 or 4,000. And we're seeing majority of these small businesses, they're opting to go for these mobile lending platforms, which for the longest time they have remained unregulated. What needs to be done in regards to this sector? What are your thoughts in regards to this cropping up applications for loans.
Clearly, when we look at what has happened in the last 3-4 years, where the mobile lenders, excuse me, the app-based lenders have really come and taken Kenyan by storm. It came at the same time when the rate cap law came into effect. And so when the banking sector credit was constrained, and we saw the impact. So this is a consequence of that action, the rate cap law, that constrained credit. We believe that with the repeal of the rate cap law, this should change for the better. That there'll be more access to credit, because then you can price credit appropriately. Obviously, with the lenders, there's a genuine business people who come in, and we've talked about these stories are very, very common. Where your mama boga wakes up in the morning, she or he wants to buy onions or tomatoes in the morning, do their business, and by the end of the day, pay back that money. That model has always existed, and it has worked well. But then you get people started borrowing from the apps, and they start gambling. So of course, when you gamble on these sites, you lose money. I believe that's what made it the way it is. That you're hearing lots of the data is saying that there are thousands of Kenyans who've been blacklisted because of using those apps. But I think with the repeal of the rate cap law, once the banks also get into that space, and the possible regulation of that sector that the regulators are considering, then we know it's going to work out well for the industry. I think there's a space for everybody, but I think it's important for people to be regulated.
Definitely. And speaking of the banks getting into this space, how's the rate? How's the uptake in the Kenyan banking ecosystem into focusing on fintech and utilizing technology to advance credit to SMEs?
Technology is a new normal. Technology is the way of the future. Many years ago, a bank is where you went. Today, people are carrying the bank in their pocket. So being able to go on your phone and take a facility is very, very convenient for a lot of people. And that's the way to go. So it is the future. And various banks have these platforms. Quite a number of banks have these platforms. And the clients find it extremely convenient and very, very useful to them. I think it can only get better. It can only get better. Where as time goes on, you're building the credit reference, you're being able to see what is the information that you're gathering from people who are borrowing from this platform. So over time, we're going to start seeing the amounts that are being given on this platform increasing from what it is today. It tends to be quite small, to keep on increasing, because you've got the data that you can use it. It can only work better. And then it also cuts the cost of credit, because if you take the traditional facility today, where it takes a month or more, and that increases the cost of credit. But if today you can be able to do at the click of your phone, you can be able to get a facility, then it reduces the cost of credit, and it can only be good for the economy. And once something is good for the economy, it's very good for everybody.
Definitely.
Yes.
Let's talk about the credit infrastructure in the country. Some of the key tenets we speak about, for example, access to information, which is very key, even for the SMEs, to know where they can get loans and credit and what rate. Very important. But there's the issue of guarantee, and the government came up with a suggestion of creating a credit guarantee scheme for SMEs. How important is this? And also, if you can reference some of the advanced economies, are they utilizing some of these spaces that you're trying to create, some of this infrastructure?
There are two parts to your question. I think the first part is in terms of making sure that information is available, and that is one of the key tenets, one of the pillars of the central bank charter. This full disclosure and information sharing. So the consumer has access to information, they can be able to compare across banks. So you can be able to make a conscious choice to say, if I'm borrowing from bank X, this is what they'll charge me, and this is their full price disclosure. And then I'll also compare it with bank Y. And that's very, very good for the consumer. Now, in terms of the credit guarantee schemes, it's very, very good, because what it is doing is it is helping the consumer who may not have the collateral, especially when you're taking some slightly bigger facilities. It will help them to say, and these are not only from the government side, but they're also developmental partners who've come up and say, we will support SMEs. If you've got X number of employees, this is the business you are in, and you want to borrow money, we shall guarantee up to 50%. And what that means is then, from the bank's perspective, the pricing is better. And the pressure on to you to raise the collateral that you require is not as much because it's priced. I think we've seen a couple of organizations working in this market. It is working very well. Some of the, and it's going to continue getting better. And we've seen even within various institutions partnering with these organizations to make sure that this scheme really takes off and succeeds for the benefit of the Kenyan economy.
Definitely. Risk-based assessment before you issue credit, yeah? It's something that has been really pushed forward in the Kenyan banking sector. If you may just briefly break it down for us. I don't know whether it's the first one that you told us or it is a different structure of it, that approach to it. And secondly, if I may make it a two-part question, what the industry is doing, because you've spoken about some of these tenets that the businesses have to have. You check their cash flow, you check their structures and whatnot from the business side. Now from the supplier side of credit, let's take the banks and financial institutions. What can they do to also boost, access of credit to SMEs?
There are a couple of things. Your question, the first part, I'll deal with the first part, which is risk-based pricing. Risk-based pricing means you take every enterprise or individual in their own merits and assess them that way. So you're looking at the individual. If it's an individual, for instance, what is their credit score? How do they score in the bureau? What is their income level? Which segment are they in? Which sector are they in? You assess all that, and you say, based on all this, people who in that score, what is their probability of default? That's what we call it. What is your probability of default? And then based on that, you get a certain price. And that price can be different from another individual who may be probability of default is higher, or a business, the probability of default is higher. So you'll see that there are different pricing. That is something that we are working through at the moment, and that is another key pillar of the central bank charter, risk-based pricing, that you're not going to come up with just one price for everybody, but you're going to take any business, individual, and assess it based on its own merit, and then that's how you price it accordingly. I think that's very, very important. From the supply side, what the banks are doing is to encourage credit. It's also helping clients understand how to access credit and what banks look for. Trying to demystify banking or credit, how banks do assessment. So there are a couple of programs. The KBA Inuka program, for instance, is geared towards helping SMEs understand how do you keep good records. It might sound basic, but a lot of our SMEs, the 1.562 million MSMEs in this market, most of them do not keep any records. So all they do is they appear in a bank and say they want to take a loan. So when you ask for your history, your audited accounts, you don't have anything. So it's training the SMEs to say it's very important to always have records. You've got to keep and maintain records. That's the first one. How you conduct your account, and try to make sure that you conduct your business through a bank. So when you ask for your statements can show how you are trading. So that if you're taking a facility, somebody can actually see, oh, this is how your business is trading, by seeing how much cash is coming in, how much cash is coming out, how many checks you're issuing. That is very, very important. Otherwise, if you just show up and then they have no records because you've been operating with cash, that is a black box and it's very difficult to assess you. Yes. So in ensuring that SMEs understand this, it's a very deliberate move by banks. And all banks today have various programs where they're helping the SMEs understand and know how to record keep, how to get better in terms of how they need to sell themselves, the banks, and how they can have a good conversation with the banks. It's very important for us to make sure that they understand that. Then we can help them facilitate and getting credit. And then finally is partnering with institutions. We have institutions like, for instance, Standard Chartered as partners at Strathmore Business School, so that women in technology, you're teaching women entrepreneurs how they can access credit and how they can manage their businesses. This is very important, because unless you understand how to manage the business, it's very difficult for you to access credit.
Definitely.
Yes.
The issue of the economy, the macroeconomics of things that are out of our control, especially for the SME sector. Recently, we did demonetization in the country. There was a little bit of cash crunch. There was little money moving around, according to majority of these small businesses. In such situations, do banks acclimatize with the changing times to make sure that they are catering to this SME, space this needy, group of businesses that really do need access to credit?
I think the answer is yes, because remember, banks do not operate in a vacuum. Banks operate in the real economy. That's how banks, they're in business, and that's you have to operate in the real economy. You cannot be immune to the real economy. So obviously, if you look at Kenya, we do not know the GDP growth, what it will be. We know the third quarter is about 5.1, but we still expect that it will be above 5.5 when we get the full year results. So we are alive to these developments, and we work very closely with clients. You work very closely with customers. If there are any challenges or your business circumstances have changed, what help do you require? Is it a short-term overdraft, for instance? Is it to look at your facility and either extend it? All those factors come into play. It's very, very important, because banks do not go out of your way to help you default, because that's not the most important thing. Is the money has been given out, you want the money to come back. So they'll work very closely with you to help you recover during some very, very tough times, and to support you to recover. And we've seen this.
Yeah, because the argument was during the Red Cap situation. Of course, there was the cap itself, and there was little credit going to the SMEs. And reason was, banks, you don't operate in the vacuum. So you decide the majority of the banks invested in government securities. We saw there was competition, and you can't compete with the government. So SMEs felt banks were not really innovating, even in such hard circumstances, to cater for our needs in this difficult time. Through such a cap that was meant to help us, yet is not helping.
But the good thing is that's behind us.
Definitely.
The good thing is behind us. With the repeal, November last year, I think we are very optimistic. We're very optimistic that it's going to work well for the Kenyan economy. Right. It's going to work very well for the SMEs. That's what is important.
Definitely.
We focus on the future. I think the history will judge whether what was intended was done or not. But I think the future is a lot more hopeful.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
All right. So there you have it. Matters access of credit to the SME sector, very important, and banks, financial institutions are making sure that they are catering to the SME sector, and this making sure that they are doing proper analysis of your business. So if you're an SME, make sure that you have your records in check, you have your business in check, so that when that time comes, you're approaching a financial institution for funding, then it won't be, a large or a very hard task for you. That said, I'm Noki Kumboy for Standard Digital.